With the WINN FM News, I am Yulana Weeks. Locally, Brantley calls for a reassessment of social safety net programs. Traffic restrictions for Glow Parade. Minister of Parliament Sean Richards says the budget presentation appears to be a recital. Electrician dies after being electrocuted. The details and more straight ahead. Social programs take up a considerable amount of funds from the federal budget. And as the budget debate came around yet again, Premier of Nevis Mike Brantley has re-emphasized his stance that the government of St. Kitts and Nevis should restructure the social programs system. Brantley, in his appearance on WINN FM's Inside the News on December 21, 2024, expressed that a restructuring of the social support system would help to reduce the amount spent on them and bring more focus on the needs of the most vulnerable.
A country like ours, it is unsustainable to spend $300 million a year on social programs, to spend 1/4 of your budget each year on social programs. And I have been a harsh critic of the federal government in particular, because over here, especially things like the electricity subsidy, there is no means testing. There is no income cutoff. So whether you are, I don't know whether salaries are paid, but whether you are the CEO of TDC, making $30,000 or $40,000 a month, whatever that CEO may make, or you are a worker up at the factory, making $400 a week, you got the same subsidy. That can't be right. Because there are people who are at a certain level where the state should not be extending its hand to them. Social programs, by their nature, are intended to be and ought to be directed at those in the community that need that hand up, that need that assistance. They should be focused on that single mother. And let me put it this way, if our social programs are more focused, you may well find that we spend less money, but we get more into the hands of those who really need it.
Cutting social program dependencies has been quite tough as one program replaces another and people continue to demand more. Brantley said politicians have contributed to that level of entitlement.
1/4 of our national budget is spent on social programs. That is unheard of. And yet our people continue to remonstrate and demonstrate that they didn't get a double, they didn't get enough. When this Aspire program of $1,000 to our children was announced, I heard people saying, well, that for the children, what for me? And I am going to say something which I hope is not controversial. I don't really blame our people, because we, the politicians, have contributed to that mentality. And I got some blows. I don't know if you recall, was it 2 years ago when I said I did not believe in this automatic double salary story?
Yes.
Oh man, they wanted to tar and feather me. But my argument was simple. You give everybody a double salary. It's not based on any performance. It's not based on whether you come to work early or you commit or you operate. You could be in the rum shop down the road there, down in McKnight right now, drinking rum when you're supposed to be working. But you get the same double salary as the diligent worker. What that says to me, therefore, is that the double salary can act as a disincentive for hard-working public servants. Because they say, well, at the end of the day, I get in the same as Johnny, and Johnny don't come to work. And what I advocated instead was something that was performance-based. Not that I'm against bonus payments, but something that's performance-based, where Tom, who is on time and diligent and works hard and is reliable and dependable, can look forward to a bonus based on that. And Johnny, who don't come to work and have more sick leave than work, no, he can't get no bonus because he did not perform. Around the world and in the private sector, that's how things go. I don't know nobody in the private sector automatically gets pay, additional money. But that created a huge stir. And even my fellow politicians, some of them jumped on the bandwagon. Cuss Mark Brantley got money, so you don't care about poor people and this and that. So we have contributed to this that we are seeing.
The government implemented subsidies in several critical sectors, including health and energy. And in Brantley's view, people seem to take those things for granted.
But people take all of those things for granted. They don't see that there's a cost involved that the state is picking up the tab, so to speak. And so for them, that is nothing. The subsidy on electricity, that's nothing.
Several safety net structures and subsidized initiatives were set up to prevent people from ending up in poverty. The Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force wishes to notify the general public about traffic restrictions and important guidelines for the Glow Parade scheduled for today, December 23, starting with a pre-party at 6 p.m. and parade movement at 7 p.m. Road closures and parking restrictions. 1. 4th Street. Parking will be prohibited on both sides of 4th Street to allow the smooth passage of floats and bands. 2. Bird Rock. The road will be blocked at 1 as one stop to direct traffic flow through Suncrest, providing access to the southeast side of Bird Rock by Bird Rock Beach Hotel. 3. Barry Cranston Roundabout. That's the customs area. The road will be blocked near the roundabout on the southern side of Barry Cranston's business to facilitate parade setup and prevent thorough traffic along Bird Rock Road. 4. Church Street and West Independence Square Street. These roads will be blocked at their intersections with Keon Street to redirect traffic as the parade procession passes the 4th Street and Keon Street junction. 5. Victoria Road. The top of Victoria Road will be closed as the parade approaches the top of 4th Street to prevent traffic from flowing from north to south. The parade is expected to arrive at Warner Park by 11 p.m. An after party will follow and is scheduled to conclude by 2 a.m. The police urge all motorists and pedestrians to comply with these traffic restrictions to ensure the safety and success of the event. Officers will be stationed at key points to provide guidance and maintain order. Sean Richards, Member of Parliament for Constituency Number 5, rose on day 4 to contribute to the fiscal year 2025 budget debate. Richards declared that the budget presentation delivered by the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Dr. Terence Drew, on December 16 appeared to be a recital. The opposition MP slammed Dr. Drew for his constant repetition of specific issues. He said people are growing tired of the repetition and would rather hear more about what would be of benefit to them.
Madam Speaker, as I listened in particular on Monday, I said to myself, that this appears to be some sort of recital. I said that it appears to be some sort of recital because there are some things that you heard being mentioned quite a bit and other things of substance of importance to the people you heard very little about. And why do I say there was the usual recitation? Development Bank, throughout the presentation, several times you heard about Development Bank. And the truth is that persons out there saying they're tired of hearing Development Bank, Development Bank, Development Bank. Just about every presentation coming from the member for number 8, Development Bank. Social Security, Social Security, Social Security, Social Security. Peace program, peace program, peace program, peace program. The CBI, CBI, CBI. And the refrain continues, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. While persons were listening to hear how this budget is going to positively impact them, those are the things that they were hearing over and over again throughout the presentation. And the fact is, that persons out there are saying they are tired of hearing these things. Tired of hearing it, Madam Speaker. And I don't know if there's something, because when you look at it, it's more directed at the former Prime Minister, the member for number 7, rather than anyone else.
In Richards' view, too much emphasis had been placed on who did what and who didn't finish what, thereby giving a reminder that government is continuous and people expect that sitting governments would do better than the previous.
You also heard many excuses and much blame as to why we are where we currently are. Who is responsible for this? Who didn't spend properly? Who didn't maintain this? Who did this? But we had to finish it. And one also must accept that government is continuous. There are some things, Madam Speaker, that you will meet as a government that you have to build upon. As a matter of fact, when you campaign to persons, you campaign to do better, to bring a better society to the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so persons want to know how you are going to deliver that better society. What are the things that you've put in place to ensure that at the end of the day, you deliver on the mandate which the persons gave to you to develop the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis?
Richards expressed that people want to hear about relief from inflationary pressures and the delivery of the housing revolution that was so widely spoken about. The opposition MP lamented that people in the public domain are turned off, and it is left up to whomever it may concern to listen to the people, take their advice, and make the necessary changes to improve their presentations. Messages of condolences are swarming social media for the family of Mr. Burley Walwyn, a well-known electrician from Nevis. Walwyn was electrocuted on Sunday morning, December 22, 2024 in Stony Grove, Nevis, where he was executing some electrical work. Emergency medical services were called to the scene, but were unsuccessful in their efforts to resuscitate him. The Royal St. Christopher and the Nevis Police Force said, quote, "Initial inquiries indicate that Mr. Walwyn was electrocuted while attempting to establish a temporary electrical connection to a live main Nevlex source," unquote. Premier of Nevis, Mark Brantley, also stricken with grief, said, quote, "I am heartbroken at this news. I pray that God will comfort his family in this difficult time," unquote. Parliamentary representative with responsibility for the Gingerland area, Eric Evelyn, said, quote, "It is a sad day for us in Gingerland, and by extension the island of Nevis, as we try to come to grips with the sad news of the untimely passing of Burley Walwyn. It is particularly difficult for me, as Burley was one who nominated me on more than one occasion when I contested both local and federal elections. He was also the chair of the St. George CCM constituency group. My heart goes out to his wife and children, his mom and siblings. Rest in peace, brother," unquote. A social media commenter said Walwyn was his electrician and regarded him as his brother and one of the island's best electricians. This incident is one of several tragedies that have rocked the Federation over the past few weeks. Regionally,
and while in the borough of Degomartin, TV6 News posed a question to the Prime Minister about a tragedy that occurred in another borough where a minister in the Ministry of Education, Lisa Morris-Julian, the MP for Dabadi Omera, and two of her children died in a fire at a home on Farfan Street, Arima, on Monday. As the head of the National Security Council, were you able to, or are you in a position to request of the fire service, the chief fire officer, any sort of report in terms of response or investigation into the fire?
Yes, I did that this morning. I had a meeting with a small delegation from the National Security Council this morning. I had the minister also at midday, and the minister has been directed by the National Security Council to put in place an appropriate inquiry as to how things went and assess and ascertain what actually happened.
The fire service said on Monday that upon the arrival of firefighting crews, a request was made for additional water supply due to a lack of water in the area, a claim the Public Utilities Minister has denied. The Prime Minister said he arrived at the scene at 7:45 on Monday morning and requested to speak with the officer in charge.
And that officer turned up, and alongside the officer was the head of the fire service. I specifically asked, did you have any problems with water? Trying to find out whether that may have contributed to the fact that the building went the way you have reported. I was told by both gentlemen there was no problem with water, and more so, they had backups in place in the event that there was a problem, and that they had full cooperation, which was from the entities, and I presume that meant WASA.
The fire service said that at the time of the fire, it received the emergency call. However, the nearest fire station in Arima was engaged in an industrial fire, and the Tunapuna fire station was simultaneously responding to another house fire.
We need to know what happened why, with the fire station on the corner of Farfan Street, why the fire tender got there at the time that we now know he got there. And I can tell you, we have been receiving conflicting information, and as a result of that, today, the National Security Council directed the Minister of National Security to come up by tomorrow afternoon with an appropriate committee to investigate why there wasn't a better response with a fire station on the corner.
The Prime Minister said, quote, "We need to know the undisputed facts," end quote. Jewel Brown, TV6 News.
It's been some 7 weeks since the death of St. Peter's longtime MP, the Honourable Asset Michael. Now, the constituency's by-election is set for January 14, but there's yet no word from the main opposition, United Progressive Party, on who will run. Prime Minister the Honourable Gaston Brown calls it a missed opportunity.
Time to even have a primary for that matter to select a candidate.
True.
But evidently they're struggling. I don't think anybody, any sensible person wants to run a UPP ticket at this time because you're dealing with an organization that has imploded, that doesn't have any significant prospects of winning anything.
While the UPP seeks to settle on a candidate, the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party says its standard bearer is Senator Rawdon Turner. Senator Turner is no stranger to St. Peter voters, having contested the seat for the ABLP in the last general elections.
I think though Turner, as a replacement, is an excellent replacement. No one will doubt his capacity. As you know, he's an architect builder, and he has designed some of the most impressive properties in Ireland. One of them ended up in the Architectural Digest. So there's no issue in terms of capacity. He's also a well-known entity.
But the Prime Minister isn't gloating. Instead, he insists competition from the opposition is vital for good governance.
If you have a strong opposition and it is about you're competing on performance, you have to perform well, or failing which you'll be deposed. Now, I have to tell you, with or without the strong performance, I'm driving my colleagues and myself to perform. So I'm not necessarily saying that we need them, but generally speaking, opposition parties perform, or government parties perform, better when they have strong oppositions.
The absence of a UPP candidate so far has raised eyebrows in some quarters, with the Prime Minister saying even a UPP candidate in the last general election, Tevon Peter Harriet, has distanced himself from the party.
Peter Reds say he's finished with them, so even if they were to consider him, that he's not interested, so Peter Reds is out.
Completely.
He's at war with them, or they're at war with him, or both.
And while the UPP determines its next step, Prime Minister Brown says the ABLP is already hitting the ground running. With the nomination date set for next Tuesday, all eyes are on the opposition UPP. It's unclear whether the Democratic National Alliance will field the candidate or whether an independent candidate will contest the poll. The nation waits with bated breath for nomination day. James J. O'Shea, ABS News.
Internationally,
several universities and colleges in the U.S. are urging their foreign students to return to campus before President-elect Donald Trump is inaugurated over concerns that he might impose travel bans like he did during his administration. More than a dozen schools have issued advisories, even though Trump's plans remain uncertain.
So we know what happened in the last administration, and apparently, I'm from China, and I know, Trump has initiated some kind of restrictions towards Chinese students studying particularly some sensitive subjects, like STEM subjects, Because I actually, booked my flight ticket back in a few months ago, and so it doesn't really affect me because I will come back before the 20th of January.
More than 1.1 million international students were enrolled in U.S. colleges and universities during the 2023-2024 school year, according to Open Doors, a data project partially funded by the U.S. State Department.
Vicky, the suspect accused of shooting and killing the CEO of United Healthcare has pleaded not guilty to murder and terrorism-related charges. Luigi Mangione appearing in a New York court earlier today as part of his state case. The 26-year-old is also facing federal charges that could carry the possibility of the death penalty. Mangione is being held in federal jail in Brooklyn. Remember, he was extradited from Pennsylvania last week. NBC News correspondent Stephen Romo is in New York with more for us. So, Stephen, Mangione's defense attorney is arguing that it would be difficult for him to get a fair trial in New York City, and a lot of that argument seems to be tied to the way the mayor of New York City has handled this case in public, right? Explain the back and forth here. Did the judge seem open to this request for a change in venue, or did they push back on the defense's argument?
Yeah, Ellison, Mangione's attorneys certainly really hitting those perp walks that we've seen so much of in the past few days, from Mangione being surrounded by these law enforcement officers with some high-powered weapons. His attorney, Karen Friedman-Agnifilo, really saying this could potentially prejudice potential jurors that will eventually be called when this case goes to trial. And she really pinned this on Mayor Eric Adams, referencing his own legal troubles, saying he should know that there is a right to a fair trial in the United States of America. The judge came back toward those allegations, saying that he really can't control what happens outside the courtroom. But as for the situation for that the attorneys also asked for Mangione, was the expedited discovery of evidence. That's something that Karen Friedman-Agnifilo is also asking for, something the judge also agreed needs to happen in this case, since prosecutors have had access to that evidence for a few weeks now. Prosecutors saying that they will try to expedite the evidence discovery, but that there is just so much of it to try to go through. They're going to revisit that in just a couple of weeks. But the most fireworks that we saw from today really did come from her saying that right now it's really looking like the spectacle, as she called it, of these perp walks could be something that she thinks could prejudice the jury.
Interesting stuff. Stephen, what happens next here from just a logistical standpoint? Because as we mentioned, he's facing both state and federal charges. Those would be two separate trials.
Yeah, certainly. What we did hear from Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg recently, saying that the state case would go to trial first before the federal trial. Now, the federal charges that he's facing parallel to these state charges, they are the ones that could bring the death penalty. So, of course, something that certainly people will be looking at right now, the state charges, which he pled guilty to today, those have the potential to bring life in prison. Ellison?
Stephen Romo in Manhattan for us. Thank you.